Mayor Preston,
Here.
Vice Mayor Parnas,
Here.
Mayor Dan.
Yes, here. Let's stand for a moment of silence and pledge allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Please have approval of the agenda for January 25th, 2024.
So moved. Second.
Motion by the Vice Mayor, second by Commissioner Preston. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
For those attending via Zoom online wishing to speak, please click raise hand at the bottom under the reactions tab, and your audio will be unmuted when you are recognized by Mayor Dan. For those attending via Zoom by telephone, please press *9 to raise your hand, and your audio will be unmuted when you are recognized by Mayor Dan. Please make sure your audio is unmuted on your end by pressing *6. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, members of the public, City Commission. David Santucci, City Manager. I want to thank you for allowing us to do this workshop for you this evening. I'll start off by saying change with code enforcement is inevitable. In June of 2025, the existing contract will end without any renewals. This is a contract that the city at that point would have had for 10 years without any cost increases. And so we want to engage the City Commission this evening and moving forward as we start to approach contract expiration on what the City Commission would like to see out of code enforcement as we anticipate the expiration of the existing contract. So this evening, Mr. Brimlow will be providing you with a presentation that will at first provide some education into the code enforcement process, because I think in a lot of respects, people believe that once that they report a violation, that the city's not doing anything, and that's just not the case. There's a due diligence process that we must follow, and because of various laws at the state level and within our own ordinances, we must follow those to ensure that we provide property owners their rights and time to cure and those sorts of things. So we're going to do a little bit of education on that front. We're also going to talk about the existing levels of service and how we as a city compare to others, and what that more importantly means for code enforcement, and what we are able to do and what we cannot do. With that, we're really at the end of the day through this looking for direction from the City Commission that doesn't necessarily need to be provided, this evening, as we understand this is the first workshop. This is we'll just say a digestion point of the information, but we really need to get direction from the Commission on the level of service that they want to see out of code enforcement. We want to talk about how management of code enforcement looks in the future, and then that service delivery method, meaning, currently the services are provided by Calvin Giardona on a contract, for common terminology, it is outsourced. Do we maintain that? Do we bring it in-house? Do we do a hybrid approach? These are the types of issues, policy decisions that we're looking for some input from you all. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Brimlow.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners, and residents. As the City Manager introduced this really is a workshop to try and obtain some direction from the Commission and to make determinations about how we're going to proceed further with the upcoming expiration of our service contract. Our ultimate goal in all of this is achievement of what the city has already established through this commission as the vision and goals for all of our residents. I begin with some of these very notable areas of our city that we already are familiar with. Our city is growing, as we know. We have special areas, Pioneer Grove, the Central City redevelopment, the Opportunity Zone, and all of these require additional code compliance efforts, particularly when we start on the Central City area. You may recall from those presentations the amount of code compliance that's going to be necessary. We also have a lot of commercial development coming into the city. We have the 1045 project, of course. We have additional restaurants and businesses at various locations throughout the city. And all of those, as they receive their certificates of occupancy, as they receive their business tax receipts, all of that has to be inspected and made sure. And if they're not in compliance, code takes over. And we all are aware that we get complaints from residents regarding the service levels that they see, regarding the consistency of service, and regarding the responsiveness of service. And many of those concerns are also echoed by this body here. There are some additional challenges that we know are on our horizon. We know the laws have been enacted with the 25-year building inspections now. So we have the 25, the 40s, the 50s. We even have a 35-year now because it's 10 years after the 25-year. It's getting more and more complicated all the time. With the 50 and the 40-year, those are the ones from last year. Those are the number of parcel listings that fell into those categories. We all know the struggles that we have with short-term rentals, but having staff available for coordinated inspections, for repeat violators, to ensure that there's compliance in a lot of the ways in our neighborhoods that are sensitive to these issues is a necessity, and it's being asked for. Other future issues that the commission should be aware of is the lack of affordable housing. People are accommodating that in various ways, by some making illegal additions onto their current homes. We had one house that had 4 or 5 tents in the backyard that people were living in. We have homelessness that's increasing. And of course, all of this is driven by some consumer price index issues as well. And because of, and I'll address this in just a few moments, because of our contract the way it is, we've had a high turnover of the inspectors that we have in code compliance, as well as the managers during the past 2 years that I've been here. That contract has been flat. I'll show that to you in a moment. But because of that, with the costs increases, a lot of salary increases could not be accommodated under ours. So I don't want to become a training ground for the rest of the state's code compliance officers. This is the contract service history here. The contract was initiated in 2015, so we're basically just passing out. We passed our 8-year mark. We're into the 9th year. We had a single option renewal in 2020, but it did not increase the cost of code services. Code services remained at $1.07 million a year flat since 2015, and it remains that way until June of 2025. But if you look at the graph there with the consumer price index, clearly costs in our area have not remained flat, as we all are aware. So that has probably contributed a little bit to some of the turnover that we've experienced. I think that every time that our contract service provider has given us staff, they give us great staff, and the staff does a wonderful job. But we have lost a lot of the historical knowledge in the staff over time, and that has contributed to longer cases, because the more recent inspectors may not have the historical knowledge of certain areas that are more troublesome than others. And also there's a learning curve that they have to get over. We did during this time, as you will recall, this commission added two items to this contract. You added a bulk dumping investigator, illegal dumping investigator, and another admin/magistrate clerk for processing. One thing that a lot of people don't know is that code compliance services internally a lot of our other departments. Of course, they're in public safety, and they service law enforcement, they service fire rescue. They also work with finance, with BTRs, building department, planning and zoning, landscape and design. They help out with sustainable management, economic development, and the CRA, and also with parks and recreation. before I move on to the next section, I just wanted to make sure that that was all clear. I'm going to go into the compliance, what code compliance actually does and processes, but I'll pause briefly each time just to make sure that we're all together. The administrative processes of code, yes, they have the case initiation and they own that case until it's resolved. If it's resolved in 30 days, that's fantastic. If it's resolved in 5 years, they own that case until it's resolved. They have to do monthly inspections during that entire time. They have to inspect it prior to, while the case is pending, while the case is open, and while the case is not in compliance. We have weekly code case review meetings with myself and code. We have bi-weekly, twice a month, magistrate hearings. Those magistrate hearings are held in our chambers. We have twice a month fine and lien mitigation reviews. Those are reviews where people have applied to have their liens or fines reduced. Oftentimes that is someone doing an investment property or trying to sell a property, or sometimes people have legitimate reasons that they've had extenuating circumstances and are in need of a mitigation on some fines. We have weekly law enforcement and fire rescue coordination meetings. That's very important. I'll point out some of those cases in a few moments. We have monthly special event permit review committee meetings. That's to include code. Now we have a process for reviewing all the special event permit applications, and code compliance is part of that review as well. They're part of the rapid impact assessment team on our emergency operations center. So if we ever have an activation, if we have a disaster, they're involved in that. They provide operational support to law enforcement. Both code compliance and law enforcement have limitations on what they're allowed to do, but they're also complementary in how they can help each other to effectively resolve either a law enforcement case or a code compliance case. The coordination meetings we have with park rangers, parks and recs, which is very important. Just as an example, we are working, I mentioned it before at one of the commission meetings, we're working on bettering the areas around our parks by starting where our park is and going concentrically outward to bring up the standards in those communities so that people can feel safe and that they can utilize our parks more effectively and more frequently. The business tax receipts, certificates of use, they're involved in that. And of course, the short-term rental registrations and compliance is very overwhelming, certainly during the registration timeframe each year that they're involved in that. Wanted to go over what the public sees as a typical code case, and to also go through some of this processing a little bit more. As you see in the front there, the building permit issues or work without a permit. We get those pretty regularly. They come from building oftentimes. They can come from planning and zoning, but it's basically people that are doing things that really can impact the health and safety of neighborhoods and of residents. That is a big deal for code compliance, and it becomes a priority case when that comes through. Of course, they deal with the bulk trash, the illegal dumping around our city that just literally trashes our city. Boats and RVs that are illegally at residences, we get those complaints all the time. Inoperative vehicles, illegal parking, the business tax receipts not on file. Again, this is the time of year where we get a lot of those, where people are illegally operating businesses. The graffiti, they are involved in graffiti and graffiti mitigation and abatement, or abandoned and damaged property. Tall grass, swale maintenance. These are not easy issues because sometimes the swale is ours, sometimes it's not. It depends, and then they got to cite the correct people. And then business signage, snipe signs, and all the other illegal flags and banners that none of us really want to see around our city. This is a very simplified view of how a code case progresses. Now it's governed on the right, top right over there. You'll see it's our chapter 2 in our code and Florida statutes 162. But essentially a complaint is received or observed. So code compliance either sees it on their own or they receive the complaint through a couple of different mechanisms, either by phone, by email, or through the web. There is the law that has been passed recently in the Florida legislature does not allow for anonymous complaints. And I want to say that during this meeting because we do people still try to make anonymous complaints. Anonymous complaints cannot move forward. It creates a huge problem in magistrate. It's a waste of resources for the city. It's a waste of money, and it will never get complied. So anonymous complaints are not allowed. The state legislature had a lot of reasons for doing that, but the bottom line is we have to comply with that in our work. The complaint is documented at that point, and oftentimes if it's a first-time offense, it's a low-level offense, they will get a courtesy notice, and they'll say, hey, maybe you didn't know, but you can't work on your car in your front yard. That's a low-level violation. They'll get a courtesy notice, and they'll get, along with an inspection for that, and they'll get a certain number of days to comply with that. Depending on the circumstances of any individual case, we look for voluntary compliance. That is ultimately what we would like to have. We know that sometimes people don't know the codes. Sometimes people move into our city and are unaware of some of the codes. And so we do look at the beginning of this more of an educational and an awareness opportunity to get people to voluntarily comply. If it is egregious or if it's a life safety issue, we move forward very quickly with those cases, and they take a priority as well. You'll see the timeframes in a moment. After all of that, there's another inspection. So we're already at the second or possibly third inspection. And at that point, if it's still not in compliance, they will receive a formal notice of violation. That includes a hearing date that will be set for them. Then there has to be another inspection. That inspection is followed up by a multidisciplinary case review. That includes our legal representation. It includes myself. It includes our code compliance team to review it thoroughly and see how we need to proceed with it legally. If it continues on, it goes to a special magistrate hearing. Special magistrate, of course, is independent from us, and they make their rulings independently. There could be multiple magistrate hearings if the special magistrate decides to give continuances, and they may for justified reasons. We have taken the position that there are justifiable reasons to do continuances in some circumstances, but just because somebody would like another 30 days and they haven't been showing progress is not an excuse to continue the hearings. We have actually reduced the extensions significantly during the last 18 to 20 months. At the special magistrate hearing, they will be told that they have a date to comply, and fines will either begin at the date of compliance or in egregious cases, will go back to the date of the violation. And then also at special magistrate hearings, we may also receive orders to abate the property. So if we have a property that the grass is now 3 feet high and nobody's going to do it, the city will obviously go out there and cut the grass. After that, if there's still no compliance, there are more inspections. The inspections happen every month. And those inspections have to continue because at a future date, when the city tries to enforce it to get full compliance or to recoup the cost of the city, we have to demonstrate those inspections as well. Ultimately, in every single case, our goal is always to get compliance with the city's code. On the right-hand side of this next slide, it's a more detailed figure. If it comes up, Wi-Fi. Over here is a more detailed figure. And what this includes in this is also some of those special circumstances that I mentioned earlier, where people are starting to build without a permit, where people are starting to do work without a permit. And this flow chart includes a lot of those as well. It's just an expanded version of what I just went over with you moments ago. But the bottom line is we look for compliance early. We give courtesy warnings when we can. We educate when we can. And we also look for corrective action, and we enforce. So some people will just refuse to comply. Some of those that refuse to comply, if they're residential properties, some of them may be homesteaded, some of them maybe not. And also on the commercial properties, we also demand compliance there. On the left side, you'll see what's called, it says due process timeline to compliance. When you look at these numbers are ranges based on the minimums that are required by our code and by Florida statute. Florida statute, just to give you an idea, heads up right away, you have to have 30 days between the notice of violation and the magistrate hearing. As I mentioned before, we have 2 magistrate hearings a month. So if you got a notice of violation the day after the last magistrate hearing, you're probably looking at up to 60, 70 days before the next magistrate hearing. And so during that time, some people will take advantage. And if it's not a health safety issue, they will take advantage, and maybe they won't comply until the day before the magistrate hearing. That happens, and that's people using the law in the way that the law allows them to use it, but it is certainly unfair to the neighborhoods and the residences around them. We try to get them on the very earliest docket, but I will explain to you in a moment where some of the challenges are with our dockets as well. But that due process timeline, if you look, a regular first time on that left column is essentially we receive a complaint, and within 1 to 3 days, the inspection occurs. Usually, if it's not a life safety, health safety issue, it's not an egregious issue, they usually get a voluntary compliance period of 5 to 10 days or up to 2 weeks sometimes. Then there's another inspection that happens at that point, and then there is an additional compliance period because it's at the second inspection where the formal notice of violation would occur. That gives them an additional time based on when we can schedule for a hearing. So the magistrate hearing is 30 to 45 days out. So a first judgment on the case is 36 to 70 days. It can be as long as that. So oftentimes, we do get complaints about how long things take. Much of this is regulated by Florida state statute and also our own code. And our own code is much stricter than the state statute. Those 10 days that you see on there at various points, that's from our code that we have limited it to 10 days. So I think that is noteworthy. If you look at the far right column, those are serious, egregious health safety ones or repeat violators. One of the things that I would mention is that we have become stricter with repeat violators. If somebody's a repeat violator, thanks to this commission and what you have passed in the ordinances, we immediately move toward notice of violation, and the fines begin on the notice of violation. If the repeat violator has a problem with that, they can take it up with the magistrate, but we're completely within the law, and the magistrate knows that, and they will pay that amount from the date of the violation. So it's important to know that on those much more serious ones, the egregious ones, or the repeat violators, we move much more quickly. You can see that first judgment can be up to 17 days. Now, it's got 1 there because in some cases where it is a serious health safety and we need to go out and board up the property, or we need to go out and remove something, that will happen under the authority of the city manager that's also designated in the code, that we can abate a property immediately and seek the magistrate's earliest convenience to allow us to do that. So that's why that 1 date is there. If there is something of that nature, it will be abated immediately. Any questions so far from the commission? All right, I'm going to move into what we're looking to desire, the desirable outcomes from code compliance. I mean, obviously, it's not up yet. So there it comes. So improved safety is of course one of the main reasons to have code compliance. Reducing blight, yes, we want to live in places that we like to live, and then that leads to the enhanced quality of life. Increasing our home and property values, or at least maintaining them, and maintaining environmental health. We all know, we've seen those properties where it is a hazard. It's an environmental, it's a safety hazard as well. Promoting sustainability throughout the city. Code compliance actually helps in reducing crime. It supports our economic development. People who are from the outside looking in, they go, wow, this is a city that cares about itself. And that helps with economic development as well. It has respect. It shows respect for our constituents because the vast majority, by far, the vast majority of our residents and our businesses follow the code. And out of respect for those people that are following the code, it shows them respect by continuing to keep the rest of our residents and businesses in check. It promotes consistent community accountability and instills community pride and peace. I mentioned before that we have instituted some new protocols and procedures, and I did want to go through those because these are things that you would not find in contract language, for example. These are our internal procedures, protocols that we now have established for code compliance. We've standardized the case procedures and timelines. Those timelines were a little bit more flexible than we allow them now. We stick strictly with what Florida statute and our code allows for. We have established that the standards for health and safety cases have been prioritized. So those kinds of cases are looked at more carefully and more diligently. Whereas before it might have just been an overgrown lot, but overgrown lot is not a one size fits all. Some overgrown lots have some overgrowth. Some overgrown lots are cesspools of rodents and other pests and animals that are impacting the people that live around there. So we have to, that's a critical look that we have to take at it. And if it is something that becomes a health safety case, even though it might have normally been a low-level case, it will be prioritized. We established a cost recovery basis for our special hearings. What that is about, just to give you an idea, it costs us well over $1,500 just to prosecute a case on a normal situation to get to a point where we're at the magistrate. We don't try to recover that, of course, but what we do is we try to make sure that the work that goes into these cases, which is a lot of work from our attorneys, a lot of work from our code compliance people, myself and other people in public safety. There's a lot of work and a lot of time that's spent on that, and it costs the city quite a bit of money for each case. So we do establish that with the magistrate so that we can recover as best we can. We've streamlined the general process. You know, any deviations from that are dealt with by me personally. We've eliminated the endless continuances. And it still is common practice in some cities in this county where people will go before and say, well, I just need another 30 days. I need another 90 days. I can't tell you the last time I heard a 90-day extension at one of our magistrate hearings. I just don't even hear them anymore because, you know, we ask that the magistrates stick to the Florida statutes and stick to the code. We request earlier findings of fact. So and let me explain how that works. So let's say that you're building a fence, you didn't get your permit, and you've got this fence going on, and we tell you you're doing work without a permit. So we give you the time frame. It goes to magistrate. The magistrate goes, well, yeah, you were building without a permit. You still don't have the permit. They'll do a finding of fact, which means they're in a criminal court. You might say it's a guilty verdict, but they're finding fact that yes, the statute was violated, the code was violated, and they will begin the fines at that moment or retroactively, depending on the nature of the case. They may still give the person another 15 days to get their permit, but the fines have already started. If the person is able to comply, depending on the nature of the violation, those fines may be eliminated, or they may just continue. On repeat violators, the findings of fact are very important because on a repeat violator, we do the findings of fact at the very first opportunity so that the fines begin at the notice of violation. That's very important to encourage our repeat violators to comply. So findings of fact are actually a very important issue that we have focused on in the last 18 to 20 months. And then a strategic vision on community issues. We started to look at the community a little bit more in areas. So for example, the S-curve, for example, the park corridors that I mentioned before, where we're trying to go concentrically out from parks to make them more attractive to visitors and to residents and to encourage people to utilize the city's facilities and parks as well. And the homeless problem that we continue to deal with. And I think that that is going to be a problem that impacts us for time to come. We've also established processes for determining reasonable mitigations. So reasonable mitigations, there are places that I know of that an attorney can walk in representing a client and just say, you know, we've had these kinds of mitigations elsewhere. We've had these kinds of things. We'd like a 99% reduction in the fines. Our legal representation, our legal representatives, and our consultations with them have virtually eliminated those kinds of cases here in Deerfield Beach. They do exist elsewhere, and people sometimes come to Deerfield and try to use that from other areas to say, well, yeah, but so-and-so city gave me this break. Why won't you? It's unfair to the residents who've had to look at the property and had to deal with the property. It's unfair for the people that have called in and complained about the problems. And you know, for the whole time that there were violations, the whole city has had to suffer and spend money. And they're coming in and they're just because they want to make an extra dollar or two, they want the maximum mitigation. We have with the short-term rentals, as it is now, because of our staffing, we have a coordinated procedure with law enforcement and fire rescue. If they're responding to calls for service, say at 1 o'clock in the morning or something like that, they are documenting that, and that documentation is going to code the following morning or the following business day so that they can follow up on any of the short-term rental issues that we might have that aren't happening when staff is out there. Establishing the reasonable timelines for payments of fines. There have been magistrates that will allow 12 months, 16 months. Most of our timelines now for payments are much more reasonable and certainly considerate of the person's ability. And the magistrate takes all of that into consideration. And I think our magistrates are very judicious in how they weigh those factors. We ensure that the repeat offenders, that the enhanced fines are levied. We make sure that the magistrate is aware of that, and we ask for that. As I mentioned before, code compliance is integrated into special event permit processing. That has been very positive, and it helps out our Parks and Rec department as well. If you'll recall, it was last fiscal year, we increased magistrate compensation slightly so that we were aligned with other cities. We had fallen a bit behind with that, but now we're in alignment, which is good. And we've also established this method for recommending reasonable fines. That method is essentially consultation between myself and our legal representatives on our cases that need to be heard before the special magistrate. This is a model that we are working toward, and it's a strategic code compliance. And this is the ideal goal of where I would like to see the city. It essentially focuses on maximizing compliance in all of our areas of the city, but minimizing the interference from us, from government, and engaging the private, public, and businesses and residential partners that we have. So number one, it's equitable. It recognizes that there are differences in individual circumstances. When I came here, there was a young lady, I'll say young lady, who had $241,000 in fines on her home because she didn't have 3 numbers on the front of her house. That's unreasonable, right? So that sat there for some reason and got mixed up and overlooked. But we are going through cases by case. We have to look at that. There are individual circumstances that have to be taken into account. When we look at a mitigation, all of those individual circumstances are carefully discussed and talked about before they even get to magistrate. And there are circumstances. You have family deaths, you have family emergencies, you have all kinds of issues that can come up that are reasonable for a magistrate to consider in looking at a mitigation of a fine. Another thing is that strategic code compliance needs to be effective. Code compliance needs to result in the improved property. It needs to see changes in the community. I hope that you have seen some changes in parts of the community where code compliance has been working. I have seen it. I have seen some of these areas turning around. Ultimately, we want local standards to be met. Again, property owners will ideally voluntarily comply. They need to work with inspectors. It still amazes me how often we get to a magistrate hearing and someone has never spoken to the code compliance officer. And they just figured they would come to the hearing and present their case, and then they ask for continuance, which is denied. Strategic code compliance is also efficient. It works to fulfill the strategic vision of the city through code compliance in the shortest amount of time, because that also is ultimately the lowest public cost. And every single one of these cases is a cost. Everyone in this city, every taxpayer is paying for every single one of these cases. Any questions so far? I'm going to go through a comparison with other municipalities in our area. Yes, sir.
Because I'll take the heat. If you see something like somebody putting in a washing machine in a Century Village apartment that doesn't allow them, I will check, they call me, I check the permit department, and then I call code. If there's no permit been applied for.
So the reason that one of the primary reasons that the state does not want anonymous complaints is for purposes of harassment, in either direction. They don't want somebody or a couple neighbors to harass an individual because they don't like them, so they keep calling in fake code cases, right? So that was one of the reasons. Another reason is if I call in a code case on you and you're mad at me, now you're gonna have retribution on me. Both of those are illegal. Both of those are criminal. Both of those actions. The problem with having complaints that are not witnessed by the complainant is we lose them. If it goes to a special magistrate hearing and say say it's something like installing a new kitchen. Somebody puts in a new kitchen, they didn't get a permit or whatever. We're limited by law by what code compliance can do to observe a kitchen that was installed illegally. Now, if the person is in a short-term rental and they want to put these pictures online, thank you. But if we don't have a way to witness that on a complaint, we have to go by what the complainant said. And a magistrate is going to want to know that that was made by someone who observed that illegal activity. If it's not, it's gone.
Just about makes it impossible for somebody to call up and complain. You can't you can't force yourself into somebody's apartment.
Correct.
Just because I see somebody carrying a toilet up to an apartment doesn't mean it was installed. So therefore, I can't say anything.
Correct. There is a lot about the law that certainly protects homeowners and protects, residents' privacy, people's privacy, and all of that. But the bottom line is we make a lot of cases out of complaints that are made where someone sees activity going on. We make a lot of those cases, and they're very successful, and we get compliance too. We had one recently that was called in, and the code compliance officer went over there, spoke to the homeowner, said, "Listen, we received some information about some work being done," and the owner was upfront, said, "Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't realize," and the case moves forward. You're always going to have people that are going to try and abuse the law, use the law in some way that it was never intended to be used. But the end of the day is if we want to make sure that what we present to the magistrate is solid, we have to have a complainant. It cannot be anonymous. All right. So the next few slides, I did a comparison on our code compliance with what we have from the contract from 2015 with several other cities in our area, 13 other cities actually. And what I did was I did the comparisons based on the municipality's area, the population of each municipality, the number of code compliance zones in that area, and also what the investigative workloads look like. Let me know why that stopped. Maybe, yes. I don't know who said that. That's coming on. Okay. Yeah, yeah. Flashing green, if that means anything. Mayor, you want me to just continue with? Yeah. Is that coming back on? Okay. So on the comparisons with these other cities, like I said, 13 cities, you'll see on the slides, or once it's up and running, you can see that other cities bounced around on where they fell on these charts. Lauderhill or Dania Beach might be at the top of the list in one, middle of the list, bottom of the list, all those things. But when we compared ourselves with our number of investigators and supervisor versus the size of our city, we came in dead last. We came in 14th out of the 14 cities that were being compared. There you go. So you can see that with us, we have about 4.3 staff per square mile. That's where we fell. We are absolutely the lowest compared to all of the other cities in the comparison. And it puts us, if we were to get to even just to the median level, we would have to increase staff by 37%. On this slide, it's going to show you versus population. You have our population, you have the population of the other cities, you compare the number of investigators and supervisors that we have versus our population per 10,000 people. We are at 0.8, and you can see that, again, we're last out of the 14 cities. If we were to try to get to the median, we would need to increase staffing by 50%. Next one has to do with coverage zones. Again, if you look at our coverage zones versus the size of our city, for every 10 miles, again, our city came in last out of the 14 cities being compared. And in order to bring our staffing and zones up to the median of the comparable cities, it would be a 68% increase in staffing that would be needed. So all three of these comparisons, unfortunately, Deerfield comes in last, and I would submit that that is a large part of the reason why we get some of the complaints that we talked about in the very beginning of the presentation. On this next slide, you're going to see on the top left corner over here, yep, a workload issue. Best practice is about 100 cases per investigator per month. Our average is about 157. So in order to bring us to that, we need another 57% increase on that with staffing. A lot of people don't realize our annual case assignments. We take in about 8,000 new cases a year, and we still have 7,000 of the prior cases. Remember, the cases don't go away. They don't go away until we finally either close them out, lien the property, comply the property, foreclose the property. Something has to happen to close out the case. If you look at the bottom left, it kind of shows a little bit of where these cases are coming from. 43% of them come via phone, still by phone, 43%. 13% are through the web portal. I would encourage residents always to use the web portal, because the web portal, you can also use it to follow up on the cases. It's right through. Just go to deerfield-beach.com, go to code compliance, and it's right there. The hyperlink is there. And 44% is on-viewed proactive work by the inspectors in the field. This last year, over 45,000 snipe signs were collected by code. That's a lot of, that's like 1,000 a week almost for snipe signs. The big three that we have in terms of strict cases that are reported are bulk waste and illegal dumping, lack of building permits, and landscaping issues. And then in the center column there, it basically gives you what a lot of what we do in the legal side. So we have 2 magistrates that handle code compliance cases, almost 2 sessions per month. There are 23 sessions per year. I think the one that's missing is usually related to either the winter holidays, Christmas holidays, or Thanksgiving. At each hearing, we have, or in each session rather, we have 138 on average, 138 cases to be heard. And 7 are special hearings. Those are ones where people are asking for their liens to be reduced. And those are usually much, much more complicated and take an extended period of time. But most people would not realize that we handle 145 cases at every single magistrate hearing. Also understand that because of that, we are paying for legal review, magistrate review of 145 cases, code compliance, inspections of 145 cases, and all of that. There's about 4 hours a week spent in case preparations, 2 hours a week on team and legal reviews, and 4 hours a week in hearings. That's my time that's spent during any given week on the code issues. So we look at all of that together. This is what I call a reasonable minimum staffing and costs that could be associated with it. Our Wi-Fi is challenging. Based on the size and area, we would add 3 FTEs, 3 investigators. Based on the population numbers I reviewed with you, it would be 4. Based on the zones, it would be 5. And based on caseload, it would be 4. So if you look at those, if we added 4 investigators, that would be recommended to bring Deerfield just to the median staffing level. So understand that that is, again, just to what is pretty typical for all of the surrounding cities that we looked at. Using what's available in contracts at other cities, it would be approximately $624,000 to add those 4 positions. That staffing level, I think would be, now we're getting to a staffing level where we would probably need to have our own in-house code compliance manager because the amount of time and attention needed to give a particular direction from our commission, from our residents that they give to the commission gives to us, that needs special attention. And we have a lot of commercial development, and we have a lot of areas that are building up in this city. So in order to accomplish that, we need to have somehow somebody that's on task with managing that in a more day-to-day basis. If we were to add a position on our side, it would probably reduce contractual services by about $156,000. Regardless, CPI has been going up. The contractual allocation has not been going up. So I would anticipate somewhere between a 28 and 37% increase in what we have now, not including any additional positions for a contract starting in 2025. So without any addition of staff, we're looking somewhere around a 30-35% increase in the contractual cost. Options and potential solutions. We can do nothing. We can wait and just maintain the status quo as it is. I don't know that anyone is particularly happy with the status quo, but that is an option. We can add staffing with our current contract provider. We can do it all at once, which would reduce part of that 2025 increase. It won't be such a big increase at that time. We could do it over 2 fiscal years, partially now, partially later, but we don't have a lot of time with the contract expiring in June of 2025. If you remember, we did have it outsourced at one time with the Broward Sheriff's Office. I'm not making that recommendation, but it's a potential solution that this commission certainly could direct and move toward. We could bring code compliance completely in-house. I'm going to talk about that in just a moment with a little bit more detail. We could do a hybrid model where we have an in-house manager that's carved out of what we currently provide in the contract, but then continue with contractual outsourcing a contract on the operations side. Or we could just issue a new RFP for when the current contract ends in June of 25. If we do that, we still have that question to answer. That is, what is the service level that the commission is going to want to have? I did do a couple of notes here on if we did a complete in-house solution, because I think it is something to always consider. It's wise for a city to always look at any contractual obligations, to always consider bringing them in-house. It would be a huge drain on recruitment, time frames, trying to coordinate. There's ongoing recruitment that would have to happen with employee turnover, and then also the quality of the applicants. Uniforms, of course, now you're buying uniforms, you're into that. Vehicles, we don't have vehicles, if we were to bring it in-house, and there's still limitations on procurement with different kinds of vehicles. Training is mandatory. All of our current code inspectors are phase one trained. That's through the state of Florida. CEP is a train the trainer type program. It's a more advanced program, training that usually supervisors, managers, and leads have. But that training is annually, and we have to account for the time that we would not have inspectors for those. The benefits and risk management areas of our city would obviously have to deal with increased staffing on this. We would have an increased legal responsibility right now. With a contract service provider, the liability type side of that is handled by their corporation. It's not on the city. And then also how we would do management and supervision in-house. We would still have to make decisions about that. We kind of end where we began, which is really looking for direction from this commission on what kind of level of service we're looking for, what kind of management system do we want, an in-house manager that's directing a contract service provider, or how we're going to do that, or just let the contract service provider manage themselves, and what kind of service delivery method that you want to accomplish. That is kind of the end of the presentation. I will just tell you, just as a heads up, next that I'm going to be coming to the commission with is a methodology for recuperating some of the court costs that are associated, the magistrate costs that are associated with this on people that are either, I want to say incalcitrant, but the people that refuse to comply and drag these things out, and we need to have some methodology. We don't have a methodology right now to get some of those court costs recovered. And then also an amnesty program. We have reason to do an amnesty program. We're one of the few cities in the area that has not done an amnesty program in recent years, and that's something I'd like to bring to this commission as well as a possibility. So with the amnesty program, we have a lot of properties in our area, and many of them are residential, that have fines that have accumulated over time. I don't know, perhaps in historically there's been a lack of education or outreach to some of these residents or some of these communities, and to try and have them understand what this means for them. When you have houses that the code fines and liens are double-digit percentages or even triple-digit percentages of the value of the home, that's shocking to me. We have outstanding right now about $118 million in uncollected liens and fines. And we're never going to get that. It's never coming. What's going to happen is we will end up forcing people into foreclosure on their own. But even in that case, we're probably number 3 at best on being able to get that money back. So the amnesty program does a lot. It does a lot. It says a lot too, but it does a lot. It essentially is a very generous program that gives residents freedom, but it also gives them options and opportunities. Right now, if that's your case, you're stuck. You're stuck with your situation. If you did have something, medical emergency or any other thing, and you needed to go get a home equity loan, it ain't happening. If you wanted to move in with your kids or grandkids or something like that somewhere else, it ain't happening. There are a lot of issues with that. So it does give residents that freedom, opportunity, and some other options in their life. It also eliminates excuses, which I think is important too, and removes stigmas. By what eliminating excuses is, we're going to give you the opportunity to make it right, and we're going to offer you the deal of the century to make it right. We're basically saying, look, the city's not here to make money. That's not what we're doing. We pay our contract provider a flat rate. They don't make money off of any of this. The city's not interested in making money. The city's interested in making a beautiful and wonderful and safe community. And so this gives that flexibility for people to do that on their own. And so it eliminates excuses because you can't say, well, I'm never going to pay it off anyway, so I'm not going to do anything about it. In order to participate in an amnesty program, the property has to be in compliance. So if it's not in compliance now, it's brought into compliance, and then the city is very generous in their look at the fees and liens. At the end of the day, it is about making the community better, safer neighborhoods, and enhancing the quality of life. That's the whole point of an amnesty type program. I'll let the mayor
Yeah,
run that.
yes, I would. My feeling about amnesty is that codes compliance wrote a summons because somebody did something that's A, against the law, and B, and may endanger everybody else living in the building or the neighborhood. To say, okay, forget about it because the fine got very big. No, I think we need to foreclose force payment sooner on an individual basis. I know of one contractor in the village who doesn't live there, who was fined $250 or $300 a day. It's well over $20,000 that he owes now, and we should collect it. Otherwise, we're saying to him, buy and do it to another apartment, because we're going to give you amnesty. And I think that's wrong. If he's endangered the rest of the people in a building by not getting a hot water heater hot wired and inspected as required now, I know because I had one done a few months ago and had to go through the whole thing with 2 permits and having an electrician come in and then the work inspected. If somebody says, I don't care about the people in my building, I'm going to do it, why should we give them amnesty? If they're endangering their lives of their neighbors, they should be held to account. Period.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to just clarify, and I'll actually ask the city attorney to do this, to clarify in which cases the city has the option to foreclose on a property and when it doesn't, because in not all cases, and actually in many cases, the city does not have the ability to foreclose on a property.
Understood.
Yeah, so the city manager is correct. If your property is homesteaded pursuant to Florida law, we cannot foreclose on your property for a traditional code enforcement violation. So that is one of the challenges we run into. If it's not homesteaded, then we can potentially foreclose. And what we do is we do an analysis, with staff, and we say, okay, well, how much other debt is on this property? Is there a mortgage? If we foreclose, are we likely to actually obtain real money at the end of the day so that we're not spending good money to go after nothing, at the end of the day? So I just wanted to point out that that's some of the challenges with going through the foreclosure process. There's many properties in the residential areas that are homesteaded, and so we are challenged with that table.
And so the likelihood of recouping that money from a homesteaded property is very slim, and zero. And so what the amnesty program is meant to do is try to entice those property owners into coming into compliance with a reduced fine.
And I think just one more, I think the point was, made before, too, look, if they go to sell their home, if they go for an equity line, they have to deal with us at that point. But if they don't have those needs and they're able to sit and stay and they have a homesteaded property, yes, that lien is accruing, but there's not much we can do until one of those events is triggered. And then we have that opportunity where they have to come to us.
Commissioner, those would not qualify because they have to be code. They have to be compliant. So nothing even qualifies for the amnesty program until it's inspected and qualified in being in compliant. And even at the end of the program, it still has to be in compliant. But the amnesty program itself really is also for those people who, you know, have a code violation from 2020 or whatever in 2018, and it's sitting there as a $40,000 lien, and they're never going to do that. And also, they're never going to do anything to bring their property up to standards either. There's no incentive for them to do that. And so for all of the residents that live around there, they're just going to continue looking at it and continue dealing with it. And we'll continue spending money to go out and cut the lawn or board it up or do whatever we're doing.
May I say something? Thank you. First and foremost, the whole idea of code and compliance is not to make money. It's to get these properties in compliance. Not everybody is going to qualify for an amnesty program. And I'm sure that there are rules behind who can qualify and who can, as we've just talked about. And if there's a developer going out and buying a whole bunch of properties and fixing them up like they're doing in Central Village, I doubt very much they're even going to qualify for it. I think it's a great idea to explore it and to look into it. And I really think that that's something we should be offering. We should have offered a long time ago. Like you said, you've got this one woman who didn't have 3 numbers on her house, probably didn't even know about it for 10 years. And now all of a sudden she's got a $247,000 lien on her property that's probably worth $100,000. I mean, there are some instances where, you know, I think it's important that if we could get more properties under compliance, that's the goal of the entire program. It's not to penalize people. I understand that the neighbors are frustrated by them, but at what point do we solve the issue, which is the goal of the program, which is to get these properties into compliance? So I think it's actually a miss on our part. We should have had this, I think, a while ago. So thank you for bringing it up, and I would be definitely something. I don't want to say supportive yet. I don't know because I'm not, but I am in Sunshine. But I definitely think it's something we need to explore. I did have a couple of other questions, if that's okay. Thank you. So right now, I guess our flat fee, our flat rate is $1.017 million.
Correct.
The labor cost for the 6 inspectors at your $156,000 apiece is $936,000, which means everything else costs $80,000. So there's no way that this current vendor they're losing a ton of money.
Yes, that's correct. And you can examine, this vendor has other contracts in the area. And when you look at those contracts, they are dramatically higher than ours.
Yeah, so in 2025, if we go with them, their prices are going to triple.
Correct. It's good. Well, I don't know about triple. I would say triple, but they are going to go.
They're going to go way up.
And just understanding that the CPI alone would indicate somewhere around a 30 to 35% increase, just the CPI.
What the labor cost, and then you add, now your inspectors, are they going to be paid the same as the manager? Because again, the same cost is $156,000.
That accounts, the $156,000 is based on what would
Benefits
carve
and all
out
that
of,
stuff.
yes, would be carved
Yeah.
out of that contract.
Oh, okay, so it's a carve out. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to go back to the amnesty, because I agree with my colleagues here that that's something that we should have explored. We should have explored. We should have explored a long time ago. But I'd like to ask some questions about that. What is the monthly cost to the city of processing these fines over and over? Is there a cost associated to that?
There is an administrative cost for a couple of different ways. One is the inspectors, if it's still a non-complied property, the inspectors still go out and inspect it. So when they're inspecting that, that means they're not being proactive on some other issue. That means that they're not handling some other case. That's part of it. Another cost that's associated with it is the administrative cost of updating the record every single month. We have, we added a clerical staff at some point in the past, and part of her responsibility is actually updating all of these additional inspections. And then we end up filing the liens, which there's a cost involved in filing the liens. So yes, there are costs associated with it.
And that's a recurring, cost because it's done, you know you're not gonna get the money back. And you continuously go through this process, understanding that part, that part of it, which to me is, doesn't make any sense. You know you're not gonna be able to recoup these costs. And yet, there is time and money being associated with just a reoccurring issue.
And there are things, you think about like, say a mother and father want to leave a house to their children. If it has these kinds of liens or fines on it, their children are not going to be able to do anything with it. And the house is going to go into a status of not homesteaded. I mean, it's a real disaster could be a real disaster for families.
So, this is also, if I'm hearing you correctly, this is a way for the city to clear the books too. You bring this forward. We know that this exhaustive process, exists. So it's a way for the city to actually clear the books, and it becomes an inspirational tool to the resident, because I think the way that it is, we're talking about properties that have issues and they become an eyesore, basically. To me, that's kind of a residential retribution. Okay, I know I can't, take care of these fines. There's no incentive to make the property better. And so they just let it go and go. This becomes an inspirational tool, could better the community. It's going to look better because the property owner would care, because the city is coming forth with a program to say, let's clear the air, let's clear the book. Am I right or wrong?
I agree with that. And I also think that by doing it, or if you don't do it, you're incentivizing someone not to care about something else. Okay, so my nephew's now going to work on cars in my driveway. What does it matter?
Right.
Code's going to go out and cite you
Right.
for it. What does it matter? So we're really sending the wrong message, but at the same time, we can incentivize people and inspire people to, once these, and you see it in a couple places in our city right now, once some of the properties start to really get into it, we start getting more complaints from other residents because they don't want that in their neighborhood now that they're all trying to bring up the standards. So there are a few different reasons, and amnesty is not just free. But if you say to somebody that, you're significantly taking away the burden, the financial burden that will never be met, that they can't possibly ever meet. And the value of the property is never going to meet it. So when you incentivize that part of it, they're going to be proud of their property, and they have to be in compliance.
Okay.
They have to bring it to compliance.
So again, just correct me if I'm wrong, but it's also an incentive for the city as well to kind of clear the books. We
Yes.
want, okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Mayor.
Is that the end of your presentation?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Couple things. Amnesty, I don't have an issue with. I think there are certain situations that an amnesty, by not having a mechanism in place, it gives us no opportunity to take common sense approach on something. I don't think it should be offered in a situation or reward the ask for forgiveness, not permission mentality. I think that's something we would certainly want to avoid, but I think there's probably some common sense things that would help us out by having an amnesty program that we don't, by not having it, it prevents us from applying common sense. And there's going to be a mentality by some people to have a pound of flesh mentality. They're upset because it went this long. These people shouldn't get away without paying their fine. As long as it, again, not rewarding people who are blatantly doing this. And it only gives us the common sense approach. Something very easy thing to fix. I think that where amnesty would be something I would be okay with. I served on the board that used to be our own code enforcement board before we went to a magistrate. I've never been satisfied with code enforcement when it was BSO. With the current vendor, it is a true Goldilocks situation. Either it's too aggressive or it's too lenient, and we're never finding all this blatant stuff that you see when you drive around the city that drives you crazy. I don't know if I'll ever be satisfied with code enforcement. Now, every district in this city has areas that, because of socioeconomic issues, have looked different than other areas of the city. District 4 has a lot of HOAs there, but not all of District 4 communities have HOA. So in areas where there's an HOA, people tend to want more aggressive, more proactive code enforcement. They already have it with their HOA. They want that there when it comes to city code. You get to other areas in District 4, and I'm saying that because having been the commissioner there for so long and been through all this, you have other areas that don't want an HOA, and they don't really look for that strong enforcement with it. The biggest problem we have with code enforcement, well, there's a lot of problems we have with code enforcement. One problem that we do have is if someone calls something in and code enforcement goes out there, code enforcement can't turn a blind eye to any other code violations they might happen to see by being in that area. So you might have a blatant, very obvious, hey, you know, the gate is off on a pool fence, a fenced-in, supposed to be a fenced-in pool, but the person who's making a complaint might be a neighbor. They've got a fire. So now when code enforcement gets out there, they see the one, they can't turn a blind eye to the one that they're also seeing. So that ripple effect becomes problematic. So you have areas that people might be like, hey, I'll give you an example, someone brought up the other night, I've got shutters on one of my doors or something at my house. But my next door neighbor has a big pile of garbage in the front yard. Code enforcement's going to go out there. You want them to take care of the big pile of garbage in the front yard. And most of the neighbors are okay if there's one shutter up on the door, but because it violates code, they're going to get cited. So those types of things occur where you got to take care of the obvious. But then code enforcement's got to also, because everybody will complain saying we've got to treat it across the board, everybody has to be treated the same way. You're going to have issues that you're going to end up being cited for things like, every community has its own standard, I will say. Some want a really high-end HOA mentality, others are a little more open and don't really mind it. So it becomes problematic. I don't believe that what we're getting now in code enforcement works. Now, if it's because we're short-handed, we need to rectify that. If we should get us up to the medium where we need to be, and it's going to cost us a lot of money, but I think we need to do that because we see the issues, security issues. People, building without permits and things like that. A lot of times the residents have to be the eyes and ears on that, but I think more boots on the ground out there looking for these things is needed. We went to PSO, I remember when we've been through that. And, I agree, I don't think that's necessarily the best route. I do think taking it internal, like across the board, is the best way to go, because what we've seen with the current contractor, in my opinion, is it's not the level that it was when it first brought them up. Changes in personnel, changes in how they go about their business, and that doesn't help. I think we have more control, we have more ability to discipline, to train, to guide, to create a sense of pride for the city. If we're keeping it internal as opposed to farming. One approach we've never tried.
Are you saying bring it totally in-house?
I mean, every code compliance officer is a city employee. That's the way I would look at it, because it's the one approach we have. tried BSO, we've tried another outside vendor, we can go find another vendor. But I think it's all gonna be the same thing, even if you increase the level. I know that that kind of goes against what some of the other areas that we've done, because one thing you're not gonna have with code compliance, unlike building departments, let's say, is, building department demand ebbs and flows. Code enforcement doesn't. It's a constant. So, while we need it in building departments to have the ability to have the vendor increase staffing based on what the volume is, as opposed to us, or reduce staffing when we don't need it. We don't have that flexibility for internal city employees. The code compliance is constant. We need them all the time, and we need them at a certain level. And I think that's a better way to go about it. Costly. I think in the end result, what we're trying to do is improve the city. Interested in this. Looking at,
Sure. Code is always in a no-win position, in my opinion. They have a very tough job. I mean, when you get that violation, I mean, the person is angry from the get-go. So they are dealing with people who are agitated from the beginning. So it's, they're in a no-win position in my opinion. I think we've come a long way with code in our city. When I was first elected, code was the bane of my existence. I got calls nonstop about code, and I think they softened their approach. They put like courtesy hangers on the doors now, so the process over time has changed. It's much better. The amount of calls that I get with respect to code, I still get them, but not as much as before. I think I'd like to see what the cost is to bring code totally in-house. I think that's going to be a big number. I'm a little scared with the numbers that we're looking at right now. It's 1.017 million per year. If you increase that by 37%, that's 1.393 million. And then if you were to add the 4 inspectors, which, by the way, I would not be in favor of, but if you were to do that to get us to the median, it's another 624,000. Now you're over 2 million. So you're going from 1.017 million to over 2 million. That delta of million, where's that money coming from? How's that fitting into our budget? That we didn't hear anything about how that increase is going to fit and how that affects our budget for the upcoming year. Where does that extra million come from? What service has to be taken away because of it? Or is there enough increase in property values to cover that? I don't know how these moving pieces of the jigsaw puzzle fit together, but that's a big increase to absorb on one contract. So that kind of concerns me as well. If you were to look at the numbers on the chart, I think it's a little, to me, it's not that far off. If you were to compare Deerfield Beach to Sunrise, which in the 3 charts is the city closest to us in population and size, the numbers are very similar with respect to staffing and the size of the city. So so the numbers aren't that far off when you compare it to a city our size and our population. So I'm not sure. I'd have to be convinced more that we need these vast increases in staffing going forward. I haven't heard the complaints that they're super overworked, and if they are, we need to know. The only information in the presentation tonight was that they have an average case population of 157, and I guess industry standards is 100. So I don't know that justifies adding 4 more inspectors plus a city oversight as well. I think that's too much. So I would need some clarification on the numbers.
And I also would like some clarification on what it would cost to come in-house to the city. Either way, we're looking at some big numbers, and I don't know how the budget absorbs that.
Commissioner Drosky, I'd like to hear your opinion on the amnesty.
I have no objection to the amnesty program. I think that's fine. I agree with the mayor that you don't want to reward somebody who's purposely sitting on it, waiting for an amnesty program to come around. But in the circumstances where somebody did have a situation, I think that they do amnesty programs for other programs as well. The state does them, you know, for certain fines or whatever. They have them from time to time. So this is not like this is unheard of. So if we're collecting money that we're never going to see, I think that's a good pursuit.
Mayor, may I come? So just regarding that amnesty, that would have to come to commission. That would have to be an ordinance that would have to come to the commission. And also, amnesty programs are always time bound. It's not a forever program. It starts at a certain date that may even precede this conversation, since now it is a public, it's public. But it is a time bound where from this point in time to this point in time, and that's it. And then after that time frame, anybody who has participated in the amnesty program and has a subsequent violation is a repeat violator. So there's another incentive for them to maintain their compliance as well.
Thank you. So I'd just like to provide my few of my thoughts and make sure that we understand the direction completely. It sounds like really our marching orders at this point is to look at what the potential costs are going to be going into a new contract in 2025. And there's some newer contracts out there that are that we can use as a model to see at the current service level where we would be. In addition, we could also look at what at the current level of service, bringing that in-house in an approximation would potentially cost. I think those numbers, by and large, are going to make me break into a cold sweat. But and then we can look at what adding additional service level in each case would be. And I want to point out the point that I want to make is that, you know, the commission can set a goal, right? So we want to be at this service level. We want to be at the industry, you know, median of having 3 additional code enforcement or code compliance officers. But that does not mean, as was pointed out in the presentation, that it has to happen overnight. Because here tonight, we're talking about code enforcement and everything sounds great, but tomorrow we're talking about police or administration or, you know, other cost factors that play a much larger picture in the overall budget. So I just wanted to provide that to you.
Just to clarify my comments about bringing it in-house and why I think that might be something we should explore is that, you know, we have problems now and complaints that we get that code enforcement doesn't follow up, code enforcement doesn't call back the residents who either complained or work with the ones who have an issue. And I don't think we have a great way to rectify it when they're not our employees. So I think we're at the mercy of whoever the vendor is. It's problematic. I think when we have more control to be able to correct the behavior in whatever way we choose fit, the only way to really truly be able to do that is doing it internally. And yes, cost is obviously going to be an issue, and that could be the sticker shock could, you know, it could be a slow roll to get us there. But I think it's an investment in the city. If you look at this, our goal is to get the overall look and feel of the city. Our approach that we've been taking, it's investment. Too much of investment in one that we simply can't afford, but I think it's something that certainly Commissioner Preston and Commissioner Huda.
I just wanted to say, I agree with the mayor's comment. I'd like to just see the numbers. I'd like to see the numbers, what it represents. But, you know, I don't know that the analogy is appropriate, but when you're renting, you don't own. And so you're limited as to how you might do things, improve that property or whatever. But when you own it, you can really do a lot with it. And in this case, we don't own it. So we're depending on the vendor to do everything right. And we're depending on the vendor to be a fair representation of the city. And when that does not happen, we don't have a lot of leverage. So there is some validity to looking at it because there's more accountability if we have it as opposed to the vendor. Whatever standards that the vendor has, we're at their mercy. We can say we want this, we can want that. But are the resident, is our resident happy with what's coming forward with code and how that code, those code procedures, how do they deal with, with them? And is that procedure, whatever it may be, and we probably don't know it in detail, is it dealing with every district in the same manner? Is there an inspiration to be able to bring property up to standards? What is the communication process? And those things would be better served if we had it in-house because everybody would be trained the same way. And the process, I think, would be much easier if we had. So it's worth looking at to me. It's worth looking at, and I think we all agree there will be sticker shock. But guess what? A lot of us, whenever we purchased a car and didn't get sticker shock, didn't make us go and lease a car, we actually end up buying them. So I don't know that it's a bad idea to look at the numbers.
Thank you, Commissioner Hudak.
I have no problem looking at the numbers, but I do have some concerns about bringing it in-house. The first one is, first of all, these inspectors are hard to find. So what happens when you lose one? Well, right now, if we lose one, the vendor provides us with another one. If we lose one and it's in-house, we got to start searching. And we already know how long it takes to find people. So that's one concern. The labor cost alone is going to be $1.5 to $1.7 million, depending upon, what the staffing level is going to be. Vehicles, that's going to be another challenge, and upkeep of those vehicles. So there are a lot of things that we have to consider. One of the reasons we outsource the police and the fire is for the reason that, hey, if you don't have a police officer, well, they can grab one. If you need SWAT, well, they can grab one. Well, if you need, the helicopter, they can get you one. The city can't afford those types of assets. So I have no problems with exploring it. I actually have no problems with increasing the current staffing level of the inspectors, because I do believe in looking, and I don't know why we chose those 13 cities and not the other 12, 13 cities that are in Broward County. But I don't like the fact that we're on the bottom of every single one. And I think our residents deserve it. I mean, we still get complaints about how long it takes. I would even consider, how do we get an additional magistrate to try to get these things moving quicker as well? Because one of the challenges is it takes a long time. And one of the things that I think we need to look at as well is some kind of an educational component. A lot of individuals get a lot of complaints. It takes so long. Nobody ever gets back to me. And I understand it's on the website and all of that stuff. But I think an educational component is also missing. And maybe if someone calls in a complaint, there's a follow-up call that says, okay, this is the process. This is what it's going to take. You can talk to me. You can look on the line. But this is how long this process is potentially going to take. And so at least there's some expectations in the beginning, because I think that's a part that's also missing, and that's frustrating a lot of people, including the individual sitting up here. Why is it taking so long? This property has been like this for forever, it seems. Well, we got to go through this. We got to go through it. And poor Anthony's got to tell me that 10 times a week, it seems. And I'm sorry, but at least you're getting paid for it. And so if I'm frustrated by about it, and we're all frustrated about it, I'm sure our residents are too. And I think that's some of the frustration as well, is not that, code isn't doing their job, but the red tape that's involved in code. And again, the goal of code is not for the city to profit from it. The goal is to get it in compliance. So if you have a neighbor who, oh geez, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that, I'm gonna plant my trees, or I'm gonna, you know what? I know the gate broke, but I got another one, it's on special order, it's gonna be here in 10 days. The process is quick. And then when you got that other neighbor who wants to fix cars in the front yard and leave everything out, and as soon as code comes, he hides it and then brings it back out again. So I understand their frustration, and I think some of it is the lack of an educational component. I really do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Why are we limiting ourselves to one or the other? Why can't we explore both? An in-house program and go out for bid of what we want, and then make the decision which would be best for us. Why are we limiting this, saying, well, let's go in-house? No, let's not go in. Why can't we explore both?
I don't think that.
I understand that, but that's the feeling I'm getting is that
Yeah.
we're heading in one direction rather than exploring all the possibilities and then picking the best for the city.
No, that certainly wasn't mine.
Okay,
Okay.
so,
But because we've never explored internal, I think we need to look at.
no, I agree
So I
we
agree.
should explore it, as well as, since the contract is up, send it out and see what else is out there. There may be a company that we like very much. There may not be. But to limit us, I think is wrong. I think we should explore both.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
That makes sense. Anyone else talk? I'm gonna open it to the public. Do we have a microphone? I'm sorry. Yes, go right ahead while we're sitting.
Just a couple of things I wanted to address. So regarding the education, which is a hugely important component to code, it's very difficult to get that educational component out there when the caseloads are 57% higher than, there's just no time. That's one of the problems. We do have flyers and we do have other things, but getting that out to residents and saying, hey, just so you know, these are the common code violations and stuff like that is very difficult for us to be able to do that with the current staffing. Regarding the callbacks, a large reason why there aren't the callbacks, which technically is not mandated by our statute or code, but if you just think about the 15,000 cases in a year, and if somebody's able to make those callbacks at every 10 minutes, they're by the time they get the thing, they read what the event is, they call the person, they update them, you're probably looking at 1 or 2 more FTEs, and 15,000 divided by 5 is like 3,000 hours. So it's a significant amount of, additional, it's not an insignificant amount, is what I should say. It's not an insignificant amount of workload adding on to it.
If somebody calls in, so-and-so, my next door neighbor's gate is out. We know who they are. We have their address. Can we send a mailer? Hey, this is what the process is going to be. This is what it's going to entail. This is where you can go look. It's a mailer. And I understand mailers cost money as well.
Yeah, we can
But
do
I
all
think
of
that's
that.
a need. Okay, thank you very much for your concern about, your code enforcement contact. We just want to tell you, this is the process and this is what's going to happen. We're actively pursuing. And this is who you can call, or this is where you can go.
Yeah, we
And
could
I just
absolutely
think
do that.
that's something that will help the public, at least that we're setting expectations.
We could do that. We just have to incorporate that into the workflow and the cost, yeah.
Is there anyone from the public who'd care to comment?
Roger Freitag, 418 Southeast 2nd Street, Deerfield Beach, Florida. It's been very interesting listening to this conversation tonight, but the biggest thing that I have issue with is I have no problem with amnesty for homesteaded properties. However, the number that we were given was 118 million. Of those homesteaded properties, what does that make up of the 118 million? Does it make 100 million? Is it 55 million? We're talking about money that we're going to spend perhaps for a new company to do our code enforcement. I found that our code enforcement, and I agree with most of the diocese, has done a miserable job for the citizens of Deerfield Beach. Case in point, a house in my neighborhood that was built illegally, but that was already brought up earlier. However, I don't understand how we can go forward if we don't consider the fact that the money that is owed to the city, are there any commercial properties that owe us any of this money? I've been living in Deerfield now, this December will be 20 years. So for 19 years I've lived here. In the Palm Plaza, there's a derelict building that's been sitting there the entire time I've lived here. It is boarded up. I don't know what happens there. I don't know if the city is pursuing the business owner, the property owner to do anything. We talk about taxes all the time. And yet it seems like, why aren't we going after the companies that could be running viable businesses so we could collect tax income and go after those people who do owe us the money? And amnesty, I think, is a great idea if you need it. However, who is going to look and police this whole situation? That's what I'd like to know. I have reached out to code enforcement for Airbnbs and for other reasons. I was told it was best to send an email. I sent an email to a gentleman who's sitting here with us today. To this day, I've never received a response. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Anyone else in the public?
Katie Freitag, 418 Southeast Second Street. One of the things that I'm trying to figure out is how to make code enforcement and code compliance work better with the building department. We had a house on our street that for 12 years basically looked like the worst armpit of society you could find. Broken down boats in the side yard, broken down fences, gutters hanging off the side of the building. And it sat like that for 12 years until one neighbor finally called code enforcement. And code enforcement came out and gave them 19 violations. They have since finished those violations, corrected those violations, sold the house, and got the heck out of Deerfield, and we are so happy for it. The fact that code enforcement drove past that house, my house, 418 Southeast 2nd Street, 3 blocks away from City Hall, they drove past that house daily, and not a single one of them ever stopped. Not a single one of them ever made a phone call, put a door knocker, did anything until one of the residents finally stepped up and called. There's got to be some accountability. Houses being built around the corner, again, 2-story without a single permit. Where is the accountability? You are driving past these houses. You are driving past them daily, and you're not knowing what's going on. There needs to be some kind of a correlation, some kind of communication between the building department and code enforcement. There should be some type of a system that somebody needs to create that says, when you're driving down the street, they should be able to put in the address, and up pops all the houses that have permits pulled for them, or houses that are waiting for permits pulled for them, so that they can say, oh, they're working on that house and there's no permit there. Oh, look, they don't have their permit, so they're not doing anything on that house. There needs to be some type of communication, something that we can, that the code and Eric's department can actually use to stop this kind of flagrant building practices. We don't want Deerfield Beach to be known as the city that it's hard to work with. We don't want Eric's department to be known as the city, as the building department nobody wants to use. So then they're going to go the opposite direction and start doing it without permits. If we do, again, I appreciate that comments about education, but I think we need to educate a little bit even more further than that. Do you have to pull a permit to change a toilet? No, you don't have to pull a permit to change a toilet. Really? Okay, so what I'm saying is if there was a little bit more education as to what would require pulling a permit, do you need a permit to repair fence sections that got blown down by a storm? Do you need a permit to repair tiles off your roof after a storm?
We don't have the timer. We got a verbal
I'm
comment.
sorry, I didn't realize there was a time limit.
Yeah.
This is a workshop. Okay.
Yeah, we don't even have to open to the public because it's a workshop, but we did take the time.
Gloria Ballard, 1240 Southwest 6th Way. First of all, I do agree with the amnesty program. It's better done later than now, well, now than later. And I think they could benefit a lot of our citizens. One of the problems that we have out there in the community, Deerfield for us, especially in District 2, is becoming has become a parking lot. Everybody, cars are parked everywhere. Call code. Fortunately, you used to see code ride by. They don't ride by in District 2. I called the code enforcement office. I was told, oh, you need to call BSO. We get off at 4 o'clock. That's unacceptable for me. In the meantime, we're having a whole nother problem, which is the code issue. People are coming in, they're parking RVs on their front lawns. And when they're on the back, they're hooking them up to the house. People are living there. We need some help over there with code. If we have to go in-house to do this process, I agree with that. If you want to leave it outside, I agree with that. Just do something with code. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone online?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Gwen Clark Reed, 1430 Southwest 6th Way, Deerfield Beach. Mayor and Commissioners, you know, this must be a very important workshop for me because you don't see me out a lot anymore. But I just want to say that the city overall does not have a good appearance. We see garbage everywhere. We see code. I don't see code. I have called in complaints, and I understand that code is moving on it as of today. It was called in over a week ago. I think that when a person calls into code, that there should be some time, expected time frame that you're going to see some movement on your case that you're calling in for. I would also like to see the hybrid. That wasn't clearly explained, I don't feel, and I would like to know some more about the hybrid situation, you know, proposal for code enforcement. If you don't do something now, you're going to have to do something by the 2025 June, when this contract ends. So we have got to have some real numbers, some real dollar figures to know what this is going to cost the city. And then we have something to compare. Will it be more, as I heard Commissioner Hudak say, about spending for transport cars, which we don't spend for if we go the way we have it now. But if we go in-house, those are the things that we have to talk about. We have to talk about those other costs, not just the personnel costs, but the other costs that come with going in-house. So we need to have some real numbers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Daniel Shinetsky, 34 Keswick B, Deerfield Beach, Florida, 33442. First of all, I think amnesty is an excellent idea. I think sometimes in a person's life, because they've had financial or monetary problems, or maybe even maturity, they let things slide. But as years go by, they realize that they have to do the right thing. So I think this is an excellent way to create a clean slate. I mean, there've been times in my life when I just didn't have the money, or I just wasn't able to focus on something. And when given a clean slate about something at a later point in my life, I was able to do it. So I think amnesty is an excellent choice. I also think that it's very important to maybe get these 4 new inspectors. I think that's an excellent idea, because I think one of the things that's maybe happening is the inspectors that they have right now are overwhelmed. So by adding on additional inspectors, it's more manageable caseload. So I'm in favor of that. I'm also in favor, I think it's a great idea to have in-house. And the reason why is I think that if we had in-house, the inspectors and the people in that department would be more vigilant, because instead of farming it out, they have more of a pride in the neighborhood. I think they would also have maybe a more incentive to live in the area, in the districts, so they'd actually feel it. If they're living in these districts and they're working as an inspector in these districts, I think they'd be more apt to be more vigilant and do what's right and make sure that everything is accountable. I know in Century Village, one of the things that our commissioner had brought up, he was looking at maybe have a code compliance officer in Century Village, because there's a lot of code violations. So that's something I want to bring up also. And I also want to bring out, I think, the permit process and code compliance somehow maybe go a little bit hand in hand. So as we're coming into 2025, 100-year anniversary of Deerfield Beach, and looking at a way of streamlining, maybe we should also look at our permit process, how to streamline it, how to make it better. Because I know in Century Village,
Can you stick to the code compliance, please?
all right, I apologize,
That's
but I
okay.
think they run hand in hand. That's something to look at also. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nancy. Anyone else in the public? Couple points that were made. An interesting one. Do we have the code enforcement now have the ability to look immediately at the new construction that's going on to find out if something in the building? They're the same company.
Yes, they do. It is the same company that does on the building side, and they work hand in hand also with planning and zoning as well as building. And if there's ever an issue with building, building immediately reaches out and has a code officer go over there to site.
Okay. Okay. All right. Any other comments?
If I may just say thank you, because you guys have really provided some very clear guidance and very constructive feedback, and I want to thank you all for that this evening.
Motion?
Second.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, those opposed, meeting adjourned.